Hazer from the dogs here.
Maybe
at
a tad
least those
there.
two specifically.
Yeah, maybe a tad.
We'll have to figure out whether or not they will be happy tonight or if Zap's going to have to give them a lot of treats later. I guess that's going to be the only way to balance things out. Leviathan's first pick up against the Bolts here in game number 1, quarterfinal 2. And it seems like the Bolts have done at least the bare minimum of their homework. They did ban out the Yemoja. It's the Odin on the other side, and Taco, there's been a lot of Odin getting banned away so far.
Is it really homework if it's just been happening all year, though?
You're just not allowed to have
the
it.
Leviathans, I just... Pairings that will never get to go together, Yemoja and Rangu. It's just a given. It's as expected as, I think, some of these healer comps being a little bit more opened up. These Odin bans, I think, kind of forcing the Bolt's hand in terms of trying to strip away that hell, because the last thing that I think I want to see, and especially what the Bolts don't want to see, is Shinto getting his hands on that hell.
I can think of a lot of gods I don't want most of the Leviathans
I don't
to
want
get
to
their
see
hands
healers,
on.
man.
It's the healers. Yeah, they're going to be trying to dodge that out. It's the Odin, the Kamazats, and now the Achilles banned out there by the Leviathans. And Hazer, most of those seem pretty par for the course. At least Odin and Achilles we got to see a little bit of last set. And the Kamazats showed up, like once at the very beginning of last set, lost, and then disappeared forever.
Yeah, unusual to see how little prevalence we saw of the Kamazats in the last set. Straight back to the top 3 bans in this one. And it is almost 3 target bans from the Bulls. They get rid of the Yemoja, they get rid of the Hell, and then they get rid of
one for
the
each
shark.
lane.
Yeah, Hark the Shark on this RTO. Definitely a scary beast.
Amus and Cobb is the very first lock-in. Taco, a lot of what we saw to this during placements was mid lane, but this is something that Zap has been around for metas where he's strong, could play it if necessary. This is a strong pickup to start things off.
It's a nice flex pickup, that's for sure, but the Bolts having a relatively strong response to the Ola run. Bastet also still completely up for grabs, although one thing that's always fun to see between different teams, although they are choosing to lock in the Bastet, I think it's just a little bit too good to give up for that game 1 presence, but teams just have different styles of play. They have different focuses, and I think that the Bolts know that the Leviathans, they love prioritizing that duo side pressure, and so Amus and Cobb could potentially be a little misleading here because, well, I guess maybe less so with that Soul lock-in.
Yeah, Soul alongside the Erlong Shin, something that's been nice for Panatom throughout this entire year. And this feels, actually, oddly enough, with the Soul AMC, it feels a little more like Dragon's Bolts-esque than it stands out to me as something that the Leviathans have run a lot. And Hazer, I mean, this Soul, while it's something that they're really good with, is still a little fresh.
Yeah, my first thought there was like Barracuda Sol, but nope, it's on the other side. Leviathans have locked in that Sol. Definitely a pick we've not seen. I don't feel like we've seen it that much out of the Leviathans at all this season, as far as I can remember anyway. An unusual one. Maybe it's a takeaway rather than something they really prioritized. And it does give the Sol and the AMC that flex potential. Either of these could be going mid, either of these could be going Hunter. It really just depends which one has the better matchup, I think.
Which one Shinto's thinking, hey, wait, no, that one's mine now, Zap. You sit down, I'll play whatever I want. Iset gets locked in, though, and it took 9 months of like Pro League play to even see her played. The Bolts played her quite a few times during placements. And Taco, this is not something that we're talking about for Venenu. This is a conversation we have to have that it is for Jake more than likely.
Some of that Quake supremacy definitely bleeding through still here today in the SPL, and for good reason. Iset, I think, has a lot of control, but mostly keeping an eye on whether or not the Leviathans want to look for a Fafnir pickup. They have so much auto attack based focus. Fafnir would really complement their top 3 so far, but the main concern again is just this Iset. That silence can be extremely problematic for those draconic transformations, and I guess just a lot of interrupt potential between the Sanctified Field and this Iset's utility.
Well, a lot of ban focus from the Bolts on the support role. Terra, Xing Chen get banned out by them to round out their 5 bans. The Leviathans on the other side end up targeting out Haddix, specifically Osiris, and the Hercules taken away from him. Harkor still needs his pick as well. And it's just going to be a toss-up for where the Bolts go with this. Hazer, one of the things, assuming this is going to be an Iset support, which is, it's a wild sentence that I just said here. That is definitely one that is going to catch me off guard for a while. They are going to be lacking a little bit in terms of frontline early on, right? Eventually she might be able to match up and the healing will be there. But now with the Nike, I'm a little worried about the tanks, or I guess like the just tanky presence that the Bolts might be lacking.
Yeah, Iset definitely one of the squishier frontliners.
No
There's
way
Nox.
they
There's
actually did it. There's no way.
I saw the hover and I was like, I'm not even gonna talk. There's a Nox on a check.
That's the appropriate way to take Nox. If it's hovered, you don't look at it. They knocked.
There's Nox in check. There's Nox in check. I'm out. Someone sub in. Mifflin.
So
he has to play the Brazilian skin. He needs to unlock that Chalk passive fully. I love it, personally. I think the Chalk has just outright laning pressure. It's a double-edged sword in a sense, where if you don't get that early control in the laning phase, certainly can be tough for Chalk's influence to kind of spread throughout the team fight, but there is some AoE control. Whether or not this Nox success,
yeah, there it is.
that is the real wild card of this matchup, is because the Nox, I think, is solely intended just to silence out the E-set on her Wing Gust.
This is, and was now, the last god that needed to be picked this year to be played in a competitive game, period. It was just Nox that we were waiting on.
Nice.
So the
Oh, doing you a
Leviathans
solid.
yeah, they do us a solid. That is 2 years in a row now. Every single god has been played throughout the year in the Pro League. Chiron gets locked in. That feels like a Venenu pick. This is a wild conversation. What's the Chiron matchup versus Nox like?
It's pretty great. You can cleanse the one. You can cleanse the one if one of your frontliners gets caught by it, but the thing is, you got to be careful here. This Chiron going to have a tough time against the check dive is the one thing I would say.
Combo onto
Good
just about anyone on the Olympus Bolts. The single target damage output of this Leviathans draft will shred. I don't care if you're targeting Awesome Jake inside a circle protection with all that damage mitigation and a heal. If Rongyu is just connecting the root, you've got Stinger from Shinto, you've got Supernova from Zapman, Panatom as well, shreds through anybody with this Mannequin Scepter. But I have to admit a failing to you, J-Mac, and to the fans at home. I am not the most versed in Nox theory. I'm not certain how her ability rotation interacts with Sanctified Field. You'd think with time dilation, there is potential here that Rongyu just locks somebody down for like a half hour.
It is quite possible, but action in the dual lane. Spirit Ball does clip Zapman. He's forced to separate. For a second one, the silence comes through for Rongyu to prevent any further aggression from the Olympus Bolts.
Uh-oh.
But a root onto Jake is going to be good, at least to hold him for a moment. But this... we're in a Quadra Mage dual lane, Mifflin. That just clicked with me.
Yeah, welcome to the New Age, and the New Age happens to hate Guardians and Hunters both. The Olympus Bolts and Leviathans going for a bit of an unorthodox draft here. Panatom tries to get aggressive, unsuccessful in doing so.
Oracle Harpies do go to the Leviathans. And I was almost going to say, oh no, Guardians and Hunters, they're just somewhere else. No, it's just the Hunters that are somewhere else, not a Guardian in sight this game, as it is a double Warrior solo lane. But back into this dual lane, I mean, Nox versus E-Set, on paper, does seem like a really strong matchup for this Nox.
Yeah, I mean, you're not getting Wing Gust off, that's for sure. That ability might as well be a moot point, but you're not really maxing out Wing Gust in this matchup, I believe. More likely, Jake picks up the Spirit Ball, does lose out on his beads here, so next time Rongyu connects that, Jake might be headed back to base in a body bag.
Rongyu and Zapman really putting the pressure up against Barra Jake in this dual lane. Over to the mid lane for the Hunters, a slight bit of difference in their builds. A Bluestone first out compared to the Death Stole for those two Hunters out there. Kind of, you know, what's maybe the thought process on getting the Death Stole versus the Bluestone for Ven?
Well, Shinto doesn't necessarily need to get sustained from his starter item, the Death Toll. You're getting HP from Hives either way, as well as attack speed, so the trade potential likely favoring Shinto, as well as burst potential once he finishes up that Transcendence, whereas Ven, he's just leaning into a sustain as well. Chiron gets some from the passive, and now, as well, the auto attacks, he's Ven rather, stick around in lane for much, much longer. I'm not certain that that's the case. If you're just connecting the silence and at least connecting the root elsewhere on support, you're not really worried about the bulk of your damage. It's just that utility setup, and Rongyu can do it from a range, doesn't really have to put himself at risk either. I might be a fan of this pick.
Now, Lasbra going to be the first jungler to get aggressive in a lane, but then to separate was already out by Zapman, and that'll make sure that he can get back safely to his tower. But Zapman's walking back up. Lasbra goes for the ult, picks him up in place, and that's first blood over to the Olympus Bolts off the back of the jungler.
Easy enough for Lasbra, just routs his enemy Zapman, getting the Zapman treatment, stuck behind his own tower, just wants to work his way towards that purple buff, but is immediately punished for it, and that's not what you want to see if you're a Leviathans fan. If anyone should be coming out ahead in this dual lane, it should be the more aggressive of the two magical hunters, and that Soul, this Olorun, has gone unchecked as of the last 7 minutes.
But the big thing to note with these graphs popping up here is that gold was in favor of the Leviathans earlier on, about 500, so that all that first blood did was just bring it back to a state of even. Now, 200 gold this early in the game, absolutely nothing. You know, it's a ward for a couple of different players here. Glasper again wants to get aggressive. Ben with the Centaurus shots needs the damage to maybe find Shinto, but it's not going to be enough, and the cat will not seal the deal. Panatom goes in aggressive. It doesn't find anything. Jake with the silence, with the Spirit Ball, with the Circle of Protection, takes him down, and the support grabs him.
The Olympus Bolts have come to play. Early game aggression favoring the Chaos team here. Shinto forced out. Panatom steps up just to create some space. Make sure that AMC is able to survive that engagement, but it comes at a cost.
Spirit Ball on the wrong U, but it does next to nothing in damage. Silence comes out. Root hits Jake, but not much more beyond there. Lasbra goes for the shot on the ultimate, but just misses wrong U and Shinto. And that'll be an ult expended for the jungler. Zapman even sitting by, looking like he wanted to make a rotation in, but now he's the one getting rotated on. Venenu and Barracuda dashing in aggressively.
Wow.
But that Disapparate, just such a good ability to get him out.
Awesome Jake might be cut out in the jungle here, but it's a turn on to Wrong Yu, who's taken a lot of damage. Meditation Pop should spell the end of that engagement, unless Panatom's got something to say.
Azam gets the pin, he gets the taunt, the knock-up, and Awesome Jake has nowhere to go. The shield holds him out, but not for much longer. Panatom finally puts the Leviathans on the board with their first kill, and now Haddix has made his rotation over from the solo lane. Sanctified Fields out of Barracuda expended, but not much more that he can do.
Wrong Yu dashes in, finds the root onto Ven, forces out that beads early on. Can Panatom chase it out? Not the case this time. This has been a scrappy engagement, just one team finding a pick, trying to rotate towards these objectives, and immediately get caught out.
Oh no, Venenu stepped a little too far forward. Supernova out of Zapman clips him and takes him out and evens up the kills across the board and puts that goal just a little bit back towards the Leviathans. And that experience tipping back their way too. 1400 XP anti-heal with a Brawler's Beat Stick. Haddix can pick up a Pestilence if he so wishes to get a little bit of extra AoE anti-heal to try and deal with that. Gotta imagine maybe a little anti-heal on the side of the Leviathans, deal with Circle Protection. Maybe Zapman needs a little help. Disapparate just barely, but even still has to use the beads after the cat connects. Awesome Jake gets crippled out inside the Silence Puddle, but Zapman's down to half. Lasbra wants blood. Spirit Ball connects. Supernova lands too, but Zapman used the Aegis. He's still got the cat chasing him, but finally it goes down. Awesome Jake and Barracuda now inside the Sanctified Field, but Wrong Yu will hold Lasbra back with the cripple.
And Panatom was under no threat of death there, still maintains the Magi's blessing throughout that entire engagement. The Olympus Bolts dedicate a lot of very important cooldowns in that trade, and they don't pick up any kills for it. Sanctified Field loss, Circle Protection as well, even Lasbra's ultimate, but they do net themselves a couple of TKOs. Zapman forced back to base, opens up the door for just this. Gold Fury pulled out.
In the back line, gets the beads out of Anu, gets the Centaurus. Panatom runs as fast as he can in this turtle form to make it back to safety, but now that Yarkor and Haddix have joined the party, it's all about this fight around the Gold Fury, or maybe just a dissuading of these teams around the gold as both teams disperse and head back towards their respective lanes.
Right now as well, this game is teetering on the knife's edge. Neutral objectives spawned up, Pyromancer and Gold Fury. We could see these teams try and split them out.
Wrong you. We'll meet Jake in the midst of the jungle there. Both of these mage supports staring each other down. Awesome Jake now heading towards his own Lanos mask to get a little bit of that extra tankiness. He went with a Pridwin in his second slot instead. But immediately Jake gets rooted out inside the Silence Puddle, doesn't have to use his beads just yet. Instead, he'll drop the Circle of Protection, but he's got nowhere to go. The Sanctified Fields, and he gets basically nothing back in the way of healing. And it's Yarkor the one to shut him down. Zapman rotates over the Supernova, slams through the Hunter, and Zapman gets one.
Man, the Olympus Bolts are getting lost in these team fights. Jake gets caught out, immediately shredded through the Circle Protection. Doesn't matter, damage mitigation's not enough. Through the shell as well, loses his life. Barracuda tries to rotate in to separate the fight with the Sanctified Fields. Yeah, that does not work. The Leviathans were there in numbers and are able to shut them down and pick up the gold.
There's no way that Yarkor by himself is going to stop this. He is. Everybody has pulled off the Pyromancer, and now it will be the Leviathan. Yeah, no, you know what? I'm not even going to have to because he just does it. I don't know why I ever think there's no way that blank and then insert Yarkor's name here, with teams dealing with him. Yeah, nobody's able to even try and keep this jock out.
Your solo laner or your support. And with Haddix on this Nike, you really want him to be able to pick up that blink to initiate these fights. That leaves it up to Jake, and ESET does not utilize Ankh very well. Again, a very defensive pick. Will not find himself alone in the backline of the Leviathans very often, so instead has been forced towards this shell.
Little do Leviathans know they're all standing on a ward. Haddix and Awesome Jake collapse onto Shinto. They get the beads out of the mid laner, and the Circle of Protection just gets them a little bit of health back, but not a whole lot of value from it as far as the healing and damage are concerned. But look at the triple ultimate burned out of the bolts for just Panatoms and one set of beads.
Got themselves an incredibly high execution draft, and it only becomes harder and harder to play around with this deficit growing.
I just looked down and noticed that Zapman was already level 20 and has already picked up his upgraded starter item. And putting a lot of pressure now here onto Jake in the mid lane too, alongside Shinto and Wrong Yu. No towers have gone down aside from that one, or from the two tier 1s on the side lanes of the Olympus Bolts. And maybe the Leviathans want to complete that trifecta of taking out the towers by putting some pressure here in this mid lane. Haddix wants to get in there. He's doing everything he can to get into the midst of this fight, but Yarkor and Wrong Yu are just zoning him out.
And that tower has taken a lot of damage, dropped down to 10%. The Leviathans, well, they could take their time. Just walk on up yet again, force out some damage, or poke your way in as well. Who's standing in the front line for the Bolts? They're getting rooted by Wrong Yu.
And you want to talk about the freest CC combo, pin into Nox combo, just disgusting, and you have to depend on either your own beads or you got to hope that Ben's got a cleanse.
Lasbra.
But Lasbra's going to need more than just a cleanse. He's going to need help to get out. Back to the tier 2 tower he goes, and down goes the tier 1 tower. Leviathans crush that one. And they crushed the dreams of the Bolts on defending their tower.
Man, that was a low commitment siege from the Leviathans as well. Just a 9 turns blessing from Panatom, and he's not done.
Jake goes in. Jake doesn't have his beats anymore. He has to use them. Circle of protection in the middle of 3, but he doesn't get much. But Ven gets a shot with the Centaurs to get some big damage through. But
Massive.
The ultimate from Wrong Yu hits 3. Zapman in danger, has to Aegis to get away. Tries to get some healing back, but Lasper doesn't have the shot. But Barracuda does from downtown.
But check Yarkor in the back line. He may have gone too deep. The Olympus Bolts take the 2 for 0, and they want to fall back and take out the Shark.
I mean, who's hurting Yarkor right now? He's taken 10, 15% of his health while staring at 3 players from the Bolts. He's just walking wherever he pleases.
He is, and honestly, that's on me. Who was I to think that Yark was going to fall down there? The Olympus Bolts, though, are able to make a miraculous defense and overstay from the Leviathans, cost them a couple of their lives. This does open up the door for the Olympus Bolts to regroup. It's a 4-man grouping on the right-hand side, and still 5 seconds left on Panatom, 20 on Zapman. It takes about 15 seconds to walk from base to the Fire Giant pit. This could be a power play from the Bolts.
But there's no ultimates up just yet out of the Bolts, especially Awesome Jake, who's that one that's going to try and be the secure for this objective. But they do start up the Fire Giant. Yarkor is back behind the pit, and I'm not sure if the Bolts have vision on there now that they know he's there. But Wrong Yu is in the front line, soaking up damage from Haddix and Jake, trying to keep these frontliners zoned out. Yarkor used the ult, but it's only going to land onto Jake while Wrong Yu holds him in place.
Ven took a good deal of damage there on that trade, and the Leviathans do a great job of buying some time. Yarkor trades out 50% of his HP bar to get the Olympus Bolts off of the Fire Giant, but that'll be resustained shortly. So instead, the Bolts have to take the consolation prize. Pyromancer goes to the Chaos team, but the Leviathans, they're back in numbers.
At least something here for the Bolts' trouble with all of that they expended in the previous fight to not get as much. And that's at least going to bring them back up a little bit in that gold. It's nearly 5,000 that separate these two teams early on. 4,500 experience, which matters less and less as these players start hitting that level 20. But once again, a grouping of the Bolts by the Fire Giant.
And what was it we were talking about earlier? Defensive positioning favors the Bolts. If they are on the Fire Giant first, that is the Bolts at their strongest. And despite playing at a gold deficit, they're playing as if they've got the lead based off composition.
Haddix goes in. Yarkor gets a 4-man silence with the ultimate. Even Wrong Yu drops his to try and get some damage mitigation, but Barra is low and Barra is gone. Shinto manages to sneak a shot against him, but Zapman goes down to Venenu. Haddix is still bullying out the Hunter here. Shinto has to back away, but now Haddix is locked in place by that Shadow Lock out of the Nox, and Haddix gets knocked up by the turtle form, but he'll be able to make it out. Maybe, though, Yarkor goes in, and a pin onto Awesome Jake will get his beads.
Awesome Jake left alone, as is Haddix, and it seems like the Leviathans know who the easier of the two targets is. Doesn't matter if you're auto-attacking for 14, if everybody on the Leviathans is doing so, and Awesome Jake will fall down. But do the Leviathans still have the damage output to go towards Fire Giant with Lasbra so nearby?
Watch out for Laz. He got spotted because he did walk over that hive, and now over the wards. Wrong Yu goes in right away and gets the beads out of the jungler. Lasbra will jump over the wall just to try and pull them away from that fire and let the rest of his team start grouping up. Fire Giant down to half health. Venenu and Haddix in the area, and Haddix is going to be the first one to dive into the middle of the pit against 3. And potentially force a reset, but they haven't given up on it yet.
They're holding on to it. It's just Panatom and Yarkor in the pit. Haddix acting as goaltender here, won't let it go down easily. Finally, the reset comes through, but has Yark gone in too far alone? No, he's Chalk.
No, he's fine. It's not just Chalk, it's Yarkor here. Yarkor also a very safe, just solo laner in general for this team. But now his Bulwark of Hope has been expended, down for 50 seconds and waiting for this next team fight.
Fire Giant was repulled by the Olympus Bolts for just a moment, trying to buy time for Awesome Jake to make his rotation in. He has to show that respect. This is a insane chess match between these two teams where one misstep cost you the Fire Giant, and when the knife's edge is this thin, Fire Giant could very well just cost you the game.
Stun on a Zapman by Jake, but will do basically no damage as there is no damage built, and he's dealing less, and Haddix also has to jump away as he gets locked down by the support of the Leviathans. Fire Giant aggroed for only a moment here. It's Wrong You who's starting it up. An immediate attempt of a burn here by the Leviathans, or maybe just a bait forward, as they can see Lasbra is by himself in that mid lane, but that ultimate does go a long way for these Bastets.
It does. Lasbra now starting to work his way forward yet again after putting that mid wave into the tier 1 tower of the Leviathans. Jake with a great Spirit Ball finds two.
Beads, or at least a little bit, is going to make sure that the Awesome Jake can continue forward, uses that Wing Gust to hold out for the time. And that double stun, man, you can only wish as a support, getting a stun like that, you've got some follow-up, but there wasn't a whole lot just yet. Instead, it's now Haddix going into the backline to zone away Shinto and Wrong You. Lasbra dives in, but everybody's still holding onto their ults aside from the solo laner of the Bolts.
Lasbra finds great claws onto 3, but takes maybe too much damage. Forced to use the beads defensively, but should be able to limp his way out.
Just got his leap back up. Ultimate in from Wrong You up against Haddix and Jake. Haddix will get locked down. Circle of Protection dropped by the support, and a Sanctified Fields out of Barracuda just to make sure the Leviathans don't go too much further forward.
Yarkor is still acting as that frontliner for the Leviathans, creating even more space. The Olympus Bolts have used it all. Every single ultimate lost out here. Zapman maintains his own. As the Onk as well. Blink Engage lost from Panatom, but the backline of the Leviathans happy and healthy.
Right now, a lot of anti-heal stacked up here for the Leviathans. A Contagion is the final item for Yarkor. We had that upgraded Onk earlier on and a Brawler's Beat Stick. So they're going to make sure that they get minimal value out of the Circle of Protection heal, minimal value for Barracuda's lifesteal and Ven's passive, and see if the Leviathans can keep the Olympus Bolt zoned out away from this Fire Giant. Puddle is dropped, but will not find anything. Instead, it's just Haddix doing just fine here on this Nike.
Everybody's just so tanky here. It's the most wild game of chicken. Who's going to chase out too far? Who's going to dedicate one of their lives to find the picks? Is it going to be a higher value pick than your own? As of now, the Leviathans, they're being forced back.
Haddix and Jake go in immediately. Wrong You not taking a whole lot of damage. He'll throw out the Death Ball to immune out a lot of the damage to resist them down. Yarkor is still fairly tanky. The cap does hit one, but it's immediately going to be purified out. Lasbra gets knocked up, and he has to leap away from the Leviathans. Wrong You goes in aggressively, but he doesn't find anybody with the combo after.
Re-engage, pins good from Panatom, but Sanctified Field separates the engagement. Zapman has to use his Aegis to escape yet another death trap from the Olympus Bolts, but it's the Leviathans standing strong in the pit of the Fire Giant, and the Bolts, they have to lick their wounds.
And the Bolts don't have a lot of sustain built in. There's no meditations for them. There's no way for them to get all that health back without the ultimate from Awesome Jake. And the Fire Giant started up one more time by the Leviathans to try and bait anybody from the Bolts forward. Jake is the lowest one on their team, and he's got to push himself to the back line alongside Lasbra, because all this damage popping out from Panatom is really starting to do a number on this jungler of the Bolts.
Barracuda slowly re-sustaining his team with this Ola run, so for the first time, the consolation prize of Pyromancer will go the way of the Order side team, but Haddix may have stepped too far forward.
Haddix and Jake both expend their ultimates just to try and stay alive. The shell has been eaten through. Yarkor dives in the back with a big ultimate, around 3 of them, but not a whole lot more damage after. Lasbra dives in to try and get some damage on Shinto, but it's not enough. Instead, he gets turned on. Zapman picks him up. The cat, though, picks up Zapman and brings him right to the clutches of Venenu.
Panatom, post-mortem, is able to root out Barracuda, but he still had the Aegis available and will survive the damage. Then from downtown, finally shuts down Yarkor for the first time this game, and the 2 hunters on the Olympus Bolts maintain their lives through what could be one of the longest Fire Giant dances we have ever seen. 40 seconds left on the nearest respawn from the Leviathans. Take your time, Bolts. You can get a victory lap on the way to the Fire Giant.
I mean, we got to be pushing up 10+ minutes on this Fire Giant dance for both these two teams, and it's still going to keep going. Just because they killed 3 members of the Leviathans, the Bolts don't go immediately to the Fire Giant after the fight because of how low they are. Now, they have that opportunity to regroup, kind of recuperate some of their losses in the fight, and now start up the major objective.
Enhanced Fire Giant on the line. Wrong Yu looking to make the hero play. Has the ultimate available, but with Lono's mask, not going to deal a whole lot of damage. This is a weighted coin toss for the Olympus Bolts, and, well, Nox ult's pretty easy to block.
Fire Giant not going to be hit by that ultimate out of the Nox. That'll be perfectly blocked out by Haddix. And finally, after, 11, 12 minutes around this dance of the Fire Giant, it's the Olympus Bolts who come out on top.
An AoE CC tool, likely looking for Ven and Barracuda in the back line. It's just whether or not the damage output of the Leviathans is a large enough AoE to follow up on some of these CC tools. That's one of the failings of having a Hunter in mid. You're shredding, but you're only shredding one guy.
Zapman holding on to a 3K elixir on this soul as he's already full build. Venenu, interestingly enough, ends up his build with a Runeforged hammer. And then Shinto sells that Blackthorn hammer that he had earlier on and picks himself up a Mantle of Discord as we go into what could potentially be the last team fight of the game for these two teams. Zapman pops the elixir, Jake goes in, gets rooted in place instantly, and Zapman is shredding through him like paper, already half health on the support, and Haddix is getting slowed to eternity inside of the Phoenix. Awesome Jake is the one who eats the damage from Wrong Use ultimate. Barracuda locked down and immediately gets out thanks to the cleanse of Ven.
Phoenix does not take any damage in that fight, and the Olympus Bolts, they lose out on the death immunity for Ven and the secondary HP bar for Haddix. So instead now, on a 5-on-5 engagement is what we just saw, it's going to be a 4-1 split. Lasbra, acting in the center of the map, has to line up against Panatom, and this is a fight he's used to tanking. Both of these guys have been 1v1ing for the last 20 or so minutes. Why stop now?
4 versus 4 grouping up. Lasbra teetering back and forth between whether he wants to join this left fight or try and push that mid lane Phoenix. Jake and Haddix waiting for their opportunity to strike, or maybe just Haddix waiting for that ultimate to come back online, because otherwise he's down all of his defensive and offensive tools. Blink and Beats both gone. Jake will eat some damage here out of Zapman, but not a whole lot. Instead, it's Zapman who eats a big one and a big shot out of Barracuda.
Shinta takes some damage from Lasbra in the back, and the Olympus Bolts slowly working their way through this Phoenix. Draugr putting in a lot of work to keep it alive, but that's not permanent. It's going to fall off very shortly. The Leviathans have been doing a great job of slowing down this push, and we have not seen the Olympus Bolts try in earnest to take this Phoenix just yet. We'll know. That's when Barracuda drops the ult.
Jake gets rooted in place right away. Sanctified Field out of Barracuda to get Yarkor away from the fight, and a circle of protection out of Jake to hold them out. But it's a first on pop through. Shinto finds Lasbra, even with the Phoenix going down, but now it's the Leviathans on the chase. Venenu has to beads away from the pin, but it's Jake and Haddix who get stopped down.
Massive.
And Jake goes down.
Haddix now straggling the behind, the front line, or back line rather, of his team. Ven and Barracuda acting selfishly, going to leave their soul laner on an island, and that island might just spell death. The Leviathans may have lost to Phoenix, but they take out 2, nearly 3.
It's going to be a barrier to hold them out. Yeah, we'll go ahead and make it a nice and even 3. Maybe a nice and evener 4 here. Barracuda and Ven. Can I actually get all 5 with this one? Zapman slams him out with the Stellar Burst. And the Leviathans, who had the Bolts knocking on their door at the Phoenix, right now just lost the game. It's only 20 seconds left on Lasbra. And the Atlantis Leviathans hold out at the Phoenix. They slam all 5 down, losing nobody, and they're going to take game 1.
You may have taken the Phoenix, but at what cost? The cost of your Titan. The Leviathans demand perfection. You have to play perfectly if you want to take out this team, and the Olympus Bolts nearly do so. A 20-minute Fire Giant dance nets the enhanced Fire Giant for the Olympus.
If you got that pick, that's all that mattered. And Leviathans, they found one, and then they chased them to the ends of the earth to get those kills.
Leviathan's in a little bit of an identity crisis, because when you see a Chalk locked in, you think, man, this team really wants to have some fun. And then you see the Nox, and she's like the anti-fun god.
Yes.
So I'm not really sure what basically kind of compelled the Leviathans to want to run it down with this Nox strat, but if it was ever going to be good, that's what we talked about on the desk, and this was definitely the match to try and make it work. And I think that ultimately Drangi's placements of his ultimates, as well as just that Shadow Root just causing so many problems for the Olympus Bolts. It just felt like they could never really commit like they wanted to underneath that Sanctified field.
It comes out, it's, again, a weird day where I can say that in the SBL and Season 8, Nox has 100% win rate. It was right there. The chalk looks pretty good for them. But it was, and something they highlighted at the very beginning of the cast, kind of weird, Hazer, because they load into the game, and there's 4 mages in the duo lane. There's been metas. We've gotten used to some mages making their way over there. But having all 4 of them hang out was definitely an experience, I think, for both teams to get used to.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something we're going to see again. Definitely an unusual one that I don't think I've even seen in my casual games this year. 4 mages, mage.
Don't worry, there's still like a month left, especially once Worlds ends. It's all up in the air.
I might skip some ranked queues for a bit. We'll see, because there's going to be a lot of ESET support and a lot of Nox support to counter it. But I mean, you've got to give it to Rongyu. It's an inspired pickup, I think. It was really, really good into the Bastet. We saw a couple times the Bastet would leap over walls, try and get back out, but that silence field was straight down, so she would have to invest the beads into that. And
brought back, though, is Benanu on that Chiron. I think that he actually had a really strong showing on the Chiron. It's just a bit unfortunate that in the grand scheme of things, the Bolts just fell short here. But it's evident that that Hunter mid pressure was definitely able to match up against that Almuzin Cobb.
Well, the Bolts, once again, our second pick here, Leviathans. They're going to start things off. Well, hey, they don't need to change anything, right? If things went well for them in game 1. Granted, it was a shaky things went well for them. It's the Odin ban for them into immediately the Kamazats one more time. The other side, it's Yemoja again for the Bolts. And honestly, yeah, Yemoja, Hell, even Artio, Hazer, I don't think I stray too much if I'm the Bolts.
yeah, I think maybe the Artio is where we could see the change, if there will be one, which we might see come through here. On the other side, I think this is the exact same bans the Leviathans went for. No, we're running it back. We're running it back. We'll see what does change. Something will undoubtedly change during the picks. Maybe some changes in the bottom 2 bans as Leviathans grab that AMC, which will presumably be going in the mid lane for Shinto one more time.
Yeah, there's no world we end up with another Nox pick, right? I feel like that's going to be something that worked out very specifically, but as you had mentioned...
Caster's Curse.
Yeah, Caster's Curse, right? Just wait for it in about 5 minutes. Then you can mark that off on the SWC bingo. But everything so far is the exact same. Up to the Bastet Taco. I mean, this was, for the most part, at this point, the Bolts were still perfectly comfortable with everything they had locked in.
Yeah, it's a pre-recorded replay of game number 1 coming in for game number 2 so far. But as far as the Leviathans are concerned, though, they're not really the ones that have to stray too far from their original game plan, but they will for the heck of it anyway. Cirquet getting brought out relatively early on, but one thing that I think kind of shines about Cirquet in this matchup is that you can ult Bastet's cats, and it will spread the poison effectively.
Yeah, that's something that's going to be an interesting dynamic to mention, but instead, you get that interaction, but outside of that, would the Erlong Hazer feel better here from what we saw last game, or is this Circuit just going to have to play differently? I mean, otherwise you're batched up with everything else that was around it so far.
I think the Circuit might be a flex as well. It could be going into the support role. We
yeah,
shall
that's a good
see.
point.
I think it's almost more likely to go there, but Panatom does run it for sure. I'm in the weird situation here where I'm like, they're going to ban Nox, aren't they? They're about to ban Nox. Bolts are about to ban Nox.
What if they ban the Chalk instead? Because it would be a little bit chaotic as well, I think. It always looks kind of crazy if you're banning Chalk or Nox, I think, in these sorts of circumstances. But I do think that combination of the double whammy, double silence was rather problematic there for Bolts' front line. I mean, how many times over did we see Haddix get his Nike ultimate preemptively forced out just because his HP bar is getting shredded down since he's locked in place? But Nox still just kind of lingering, I guess, in everybody's mind.
Like a bad smell.
Yeah, well...
Like she tends to do all the time.
You can tell, I think you can get the dynamic of what Nox is like, and most of the time you experience it in Arena. Look, if I'm trying to chill in Arena, the last thing I want to see is Nox on the other side. Either way, they do tend to agree with you, Hazer, a little bit, thinking that the Circuit isn't necessarily for the jungle, because it's Susano Daji banned out here by the Bolts. Chiron Osiris are banned out on the other side. Chalk's going to get locked in, but it's by the Bolts this time, Taco.
Well, you don't have to worry about playing against it if you just pick it for yourself instead. And I do think that Chalk, especially against a double pseudo ADC frontline, I mean, Soul, she practically factors in as another hunter here, even though she's a mage, definitely just a magical ADC. So it's all more or less the same. And for Chalk, having that attack speed slow as a rather effective part of his kit, I think, up against the Leviathans here. But does kind of play into the sense that all of this self-sustain is a prime pickings for a Circuit, whether she's support or intended for that jungle position. Leviathans can definitely look to just isolate one member of the Bolts with that anti-heal.
We're looking at row here, but just a second ago it was the full team for the Bolts. And they all look pretty relaxed to the point where Jake, I would almost argue, had looked bored. Like he looked like he was ready to go to sleep at any point. Granted, we'll see what he's able to do. Probably not feeling too happy with the loss there. But going back to the E set, again, something that treated them pretty well throughout placements, although what a wild world we live in where that's something that not only is it like a pick for the Bolts, but they're regularly going back to it.
Yeah, this is just, I mean, this is the most wild picks and bans we've had at a Worlds in a long time, I feel like. I don't remember the last one that I was as in awe as I am of this one. I wonder if we will see the Nox run back one more time with the Leviathans, or if they'll look for something else now that the Chak's been taken away. I mean, it's still a fairly decent Nox game, but maybe worried. And there's no Chiron for the cleanse this time, so I don't know. I definitely could see it coming through again.
I'm still trying to puzzle through what a fairly decent Nox game looks like how to gauge the field to know when Nox is going to be worthwhile. Gilgamesh gets locked in here, and Taco, this has been a pick that we've seen very popular in the jungle. Feels like it should pretty much go there, kind of locking in what should be Soul Circuit as the dual lane, and now a Cerberus as well for the solo lane.
A little bit of a more traditional frontline feature here out of the Leviathans. In the Gilgamesh, again, I think a really strong flex pick opportunity for the Leviathans, because it could still be Gilgamesh support there for Rongyu, although I would definitely lean a little bit more towards the Circuit or even the Cerberus. But I like the fact that there is so much variety, and more importantly, the Leviathans looking to kind of negate a lot of that space control that the ESA and Chalk brought to the board originally.
Now it's a lot of options, specifically the Chalk Cerberus matchup. That's one, like, we've seen Cerberus, and for a long time, that's literally all he was. Hazer was just like, cool, you're playing something that either A has healing or B has good control. I'm just going to lock in Cerberus and know that I can help shut down a little bit of that.
Yeah, he's definitely fallen off a lot as of late, but Chak seems like a pretty ideal matchup for him. Has the on-demand kind of leap there to get away from Chak's ult if he needs to. Yeah. Has the healing reduction here for both the ESAT, the Chak, and the Olorun. Has a little bit of healing in his kit and will probably be building some lifesteal. So going to counter out that healing quite nicely with Cerberus passive. As we see the last pick come through here for the Bolts. I don't know where they're going to go here. Will they go for an Olorun still in the Hunter role?
Yeah, I was going to say, who do they need? They need Vin's pick right here, right?
I would think so.
So Medusa gets locked in.
Ooh, could be Barra.
And this was something, yeah, when we were looking at it earlier, Taco, for the Scarabs, I was like, oh, right, Medusa feels like it should be mid, and yet they ended up throwing it over towards Stewart. Do you think this is going to be a Barra?
I would say that wave clear probably still favors Shinto on this AMC. He can just drop that wave clear from a good distance, whereas Ven on this Medusa is going to be very apt to look towards early engagements, pre-5 specifically. Really wants to get involved up against Shinto, has a good deal of damage output. The second Viper shot comes up, really. He's going to start winning those 1v1. So the Leviathan's likely going to look to play safely around mid and have Shinto farm up. Oh, okay. That's just Leviathans holistically. That's not even just this draft. That's how they want to play, and they've built a draft around it incredibly well. Whereas the Olympus Bolts, on the other hand, essentially have a I'm salty, run it back style of draft. We're back on the E set, Olorun, even Laz, we're going back towards that Bastet as well. But what did we see from Bastet in game one? Not a whole lot.
Not much.
Not much from him. That ultimate really was not finding a whole ton of value. So this time around, I think the Bolts jungler has to get a redemption arc.
Well, this time we have triple mage and an assassin in the dual lane compared to the quad mages that we had last game. You know, it's so funny, Mifflin, because I remember talking to Shinto in a pregame interview, or maybe it was a postgame interview one time, just before Phase 3 kind of hit, before we really got that assassin patch that came through with that, like, 8.9.
Best patch
And I remember asking him kind of, you know, what are some of the things we might be seeing with this new patch? And he kind of alluded to Hunter mid way back then, but it didn't really come into fruition until these last placements. Maybe we got to see a little bit of it during that Phase 3 playoffs as well, but now we're really seeing that one come out strong here.
Just so much pressure, so much fight potential throughout the early portions of the game. Hunters and mid really have found their home at the tail end of this season, and maybe due in fact to just the raw mage ADCs we've been seeing as well on the other side. I'm expecting the Leviathans, and I said it last time around, Panatom likely going to try and make some rotations over towards Barracuda on this Oleron, even more so now on this Gilgamesh. Has some great displacement with a drop kick, wins a Shamash, very hard to play around. Barracuda, again, largely a mobile mage on this Oleron, but in game one, we saw the Leviathans do everything in their power to fight not where Barracuda was. If Sanctified Field was an option, they didn't want it.
Okay, well that's a quick beads out of Haddix there, out of the drop kick from Panatom. Lasbra goes in. Yarkor does have the jump to get away, but he'll be chased out by Lasbra and Haddix. The 2v2 in the solo lane. The breath comes through to slow down Haddix, and the meditation pulses from the Leviathans, and they'll be nice and healthy. Can't say the same for Haddix, as he's sitting about 30% health. Meanwhile, bit of a scuffle over here in this. Wait, Wrong, you just stole that.
Yeah, Rongyu is built different, man. That guy is just a strange being. We could not reproduce him in a lab if we tried. Yeah, Panatom is just built different. Just a strange human being. We couldn't reproduce him in a lab if we tried. The Leviathan's getting dominance on the side lane buffs. So far, both blue and purple stripped away a significant win on both sides of the map.
And that's going to allow them to get a little bit of extra pressure in those lanes. Now Barracuda won't have that extra boost to the attack speed. Chalk won't have the same level of sustain, but thanks to his passive, he's not too worried about it. It's Zapman, however, who's eating the big brunt of damage here. Barracuda a little off the mark there with that first ability from the Yola run. Not able to get the damage out, but at least pushing them back under this tier 1.
Early on, he would love to be fighting right now, and not super an option when you don't have that CC immune ult available.
Talk about an ideal quest item for Panatom to have gotten, a tier 1 cloak. And that Magi's Blessing could be such an important thing that he can grab for himself, or he can go towards one of those other cloak options. Zapman uses Supernova. Barracuda will rush him down and Disapparate. Just barely comes up in time to keep Zapman alive. Barracuda almost with the solo kill.
Yeah, we'll see if Zapman decides to stick around. A snipe could take him out. He has to play cautious here.
He's going to throw out the Stellar Burst, but Jake is now on the way, and I don't think he wants to stick around. Meanwhile, we have a 3-man rotation over to try and kill Haddix, and they will do so for first blood. The ticks, not quite enough, but Panatom does get it, and now Shinto has come over to help his hunter out. Awesome Jake has to drop his own ultimate just to get himself out. But Shinto, the good teammate, comes to help out Zap.
And Jake tries to stick around. He wants this purple buff invade, but he's playing with fire, and he gets taken down. Shinto says, you are not allowed to have this buff. Nobody takes farm for the mid laner of the Leviathans, and Zapman does not go back to base. He's still here. Do they want to fight Barracuda? I don't love your odds anymore. Jake tried, and he died.
Zapman is playing with the ultimate fire right now by sticking around this lane for so long. Jake rotated all the way basically from base as that initial solo fight began, rotates in, and then Zap goes, hey Shinto, you busy? Well, I'm kind of against the farm. Well, you want to get a little bit more farm? Oh, yeah. Shinto rotates over to help him get that. Not just save Zapman, not just secure the buff, but get a kill and put 2 up now for the Leviathans.
Experience has been largely equalized for the most part. Support about a 1-level gap for Rongyu, but outside of that, about even everywhere else.
That might have been one of the first triple splits I've seen in the mid lane in a long time out of the Leviathans.
And Shinto hated it, I guarantee it.
He's mad. He's still up in net worth above everybody else, so he's still top. So he's happy about that. But the Bolts are not happy about this invade around the blue buff. 4 versus 4. The Hunters are on their own island while the rest of the team is fighting around this blue buff. Jake pulled back in. The stun is not good. Yarkor and Shinto take him out as the Stinger deals the final blow to Jake. And in the 4v4, it's the Leviathans who come out with 1.
Man, Yarkor, that stun, phenomenal. The Stygian Torment finds all the priority targets. Jake thought he was allowed to step up yet again. Unfortunate, you got slammed by the Honey, you got slammed by Rongyu, and you get sent back to base in a body bag all in one fell swoop, and it wasn't a cheap death either. It cost him his ultimate and his relic. So now Jake, susceptible to the exact same thing yet again. Silver lining for the Olympus Bolts, their buffs aren't up just yet, so maybe the Leviathans will leave him alone for a moment.
Well, Zapman, he does have his buff just about to respawn. Lasbra finally wants to get himself active on this left side. Zapman caught out Supernova and the Disapparate. Get him out for only a moment, but Lasbra grabs him with the cat and finally able to make some impact on this left side. Barongyu is here, and he's not very happy about you taking out his Hunter, but there's not a whole lot that he can do.
Yeah, luckily for the Olympus Bolts, it wasn't Shinto again, or he would have been with a vengeance for that purple buff steal, luckily. But the Olympus Bolts are able to at least pick up a kill. Does cost Lasbra his own ultimate. There still are a couple of beads down for the Leviathans to try and exploit, but instead, it's a tier 1 tower stripped away in the duo lane. The Olympus Bolts strike first, but Oleron is not allowed to play very far up in that lane. We could see Zapman try and freeze it out.
Phantom stunned out. He wanted to get that wraparound drop kick in the mid lane, but Awesome Jake spotted him out walking through the minions and got a nice little silence to hold him back. So instead, Panatom will just go back to base. It is a Witchblade coming
Is
at
significant at this portion of the game. You got to think that the Leviathans want to utilize that while that power spike is still there. Lasbra, at level 11, does not have the luxury of having a secondary relic. Thank you very much, Doug. Wrong you, being a freak in mid. Now's the time to fight. If you're on the Leviathans, you want to get involved before Lasbra ticks to 12.
There's no way Jake didn't just spot him. There's no way he hasn't been revealed
It's
yet.
tiny.
That's got to be a very, very small radius to see him get. He just watched two people
And he's still there.
clear a lane. No fear on this man. Will now jump in to find Awesome Jake. Hits him with the last breath. And it's just the bees from the swarm.
What?
And Shinto with the stinger obliterates Lasbra, puts him in the grave, and now Haddock's the one on the run.
It's Ven still chasing out, separating this engagement. It's a 2v2 on the right and a 2v2 on the left. Wrong you acting as goaltender. Make sure that Barracuda and Jake aren't able to rotate their way in. So the Pyromancer has been pulled by the Leviathans and immediately reset. Four-man grouping from the Olympus Bolts is enough to dissuade the Order side team. But with Barracuda making this large rotation to the right-hand side of the map, that creates the space for Zapman to close up that level lead this Oleron had already established. Now 13-13 are these Hunters, and well, Zap's strategically placed a minion wave in Barracuda's tower.
Not just one, but a second one on the way over there. Zapman, or Barracuda, hasn't rotated back in to try and get that extra farm. Instead, it's Zapman picking up the Oracle Heartbeat, and the rest of the Leviathans picking up a Pyromancer. And this is something they do all the time.
Clean, clinical play from the Order side.
Last game they heard, hey, you guys like frontliners? Well, now Panatom wants to join this mix yet again, as it is a Shogun's Kusari picked up right
That's
after
gross.
the Witchblade. So he's going to be boosting up the attack speed of his two big Hunter-style allies here. Wrong Yu goes in with the blink, Cobra's Kiss, and a last breath that Jake has absolutely nowhere to go. Picked off and taken off the map.
Man, that just robbed in broad daylight. Jake's like, I was walking back to my car at night. I had all my homies with me. There's no way I get mugged on my own tier 1. But it's exactly what happens. You gotta bring a gun next time, Jake. You just don't live those. Wrong You says, hey, it's really cool that you dropped Circle Protection. Be super wild if you didn't heal, and he doesn't. And now the Leviathans, they start the gold.
4 around this Fury for the Leviathans, only 3 out of the Bolts. Haddock's a little late on his rotation over, and the Gold Fury will go to ease here for the Atlantis Leviathans. Not even an instance of trouble out of this team as they grab that one out. Funny enough, it was a Bluestone 9 damage tick that actually secured the last hit. Always a little fun to see.
God,
what ends
Shito's
up
gotta
being
do
that
everything.
He really does. He said, guys, this has got to be my Fury. I know last hitting it doesn't give me extra gold, but I just got to imagine that it does. Started up by the supports yet again. They're able to grab those. Once it's a Sovereignty, though, out of Awesome Jake for some of that extra physical prop. Meanwhile, Wrong You just goes with the straight health option, some CDR, but most importantly, that 40-second cooldown knockoff that the Relic Dagger provides. And that Blinking On are going to be up all the time, and he's going to put perfect
poor
use
guy.
to it right up against Awesome Jake. This time, he's got some buddies at least helping him out, but Jake has to go all the way back to the depth of the Tier 1 tower just to get away from the mugging of the Atlantis Leviathans.
That's Heavenly and Sprint expended by Awesome Jake, as well as the ultimate, so he's a sitting duck in this next fight. Pyromancer already respawned. The Leviathans can start to work their way over there. With desynced neutral objectives, they really do get to set the pace of this one. I'm keeping my eyes on Jake in this next fight. They've worked through his Kevlar, and now's the time to take his wallet as well. The Leviathans, they've got a vendetta against the rookie of the Olympus Bolts. Jake has not been allowed to play.
Jake has been very quiet in this game, and not to his own fault here. It's just he has been that primary target. Last game, he was able to make some very
Squad leave
solid.
it up to a coin toss. Instead, the Leviathans looking to leverage the gold advantage and experience advantage that they've already net for themselves, have grouped up around the Gold Fury proper. Oracle Vision to the Bolts, Actual Ward Vision to the Leviathans, and all 5 here from both teams.
There are few players in this league that will do what Wrong You just did, which is walk up and stare down 3 people as a Circuit support and effectively force them to go away from the objective that his team wants to take. Primal Fury being shredded quickly. It will be leashed away and then picked back up. Zapman holding it. Haddock goes to the back line with a big ultimate of his own. He's only going to get one with it. Otherwise, it's just the silence from Jake that holds the Leviathans back.
The Leviathans are just waiting for that Sanctified Field to get dropped by Barracuda. Once that is expended, the Leviathans disengage and will completely re-engage, spearhead the next segment of the team fight. Barracuda, very wisely, holding on to that cooldown, realizing that that really is the maneuver that shifts the tides of these team fights. Barracuda might just be the most important person on the map right now.
Rongyu's blink is back up. He can make a nice quick beeline to the back line if he wishes to, but instead it'll just be Shinto getting some damage up against Haddix, and Yarkor doing his best to try and zone the backliners. Keep your eye on Lasbra. He's been fishing around this left side of the Fury Pit for the entirety of this Fury dance.
Zapman able to resustain himself back up to full. Haddix utilizing his blink earlier on with the ultimate was able to drop Zapman low, but you wouldn't believe it looking at him now.
Primal Fury started up and then pulled away immediately. Yarkor goes in, Haddix goes for the ultimate, but Zapman will immune it out with a supernova that's crashing down on top of Haddix, and Shinto with the stinger takes down one. Yarkor finds Haddix, and quickly it's only 3 left alive on the Olympus Bolts, and that 3 may be no more as Barracuda is surrounded by the Leviathans and burned down.
Man, Lasbra just overcommits in that team fight, takes way too much damage, forces Barracuda to step forward, and Barracuda, to his credit, is able to find a phenomenal ultimate, locks down 3 members of the Leviathans in the entirety of the Sanctified Fields, which should only leave a bad taste in the mouth of the Olympus Bolts, because nobody on the Leviathans falls down in that fight. The fight may have erupted around the Primal Fury, but we were fighting over the Fire Giant the entire time, and well, there's still 3 dead on the Bolts. Gotta think this one's free.
It was a fake out. It was all a Fire Giant dance from the very beginning. Panatom tanking this one up with how much extra tankiness he has thanks to the build that he's facilitated himself with. And it will be the Fire Giant, 22:50 on the clock, going to the Atlantis Leviathans. Kill on Zapman one time in 2 games, one time each in those 2 games, I should say.
Yeah, just not ideal performance so far from Lasbra out of the jungle. He's got damage output. I mean, he's up there on the charts, dead center. I mean, he's a slightly higher than Panatom, but Panatom's not a damage dealer. He's a support.
Well, Rongyu's going to go ahead and mug Lasbra inside of his jungle. There's an ultimate that holds Panatom down, but
no.
He's not going anywhere. Lasbra, though, he's going right back to the fountain. Panatom and Rongyu team up to take him out, and now it's a 4v3 on this left Phoenix. They might not have the tankiness to try and go through this one, and Zapman lose out a nice bit of his health bar, but now the rest of the team is here. They can regroup and push down this Phoenix.
Yeah, Lasbra's dead for 40 entire seconds. The Phoenix will fall from 0 defense with the bolts.
Yarkor goes in, only finds 1, and Haddix will use a quick bead. Sanctified Field out of Barracuda holds them out, but Supernova is crashing through the backline. Barra has no health bar left as Panatom jumps in to take him out. Venenu slowed down, has to use the Aegis to try and delay as long as he can. He'll make it back to the fountain, as will Jake, but the Leviathans not quite as healthy as they may have wished for to try and go for this Titan.
Good stun nearly from Awesome Jake, connects with Zapman, but instead he just walks his way out of there. The Leviathans may have loved to have go for the end there, but Lasbra will be rejoining the land of the living in just under 2 seconds. The Olympus Bolts maintain their base, but lose out on the Phoenix, and there still are 5 members of the Leviathans alive. A couple of them still have their ultimate somehow.
Because the Leviathans are still sitting around this pit, I mean, they're around the Fire Giant now, but Barracuda has been literally sitting on this side of the map for over a minute, trying to deal with this Draugr,
he's delaying it for the Fire Giant
trying to deal
push
with this wave, but now he is holding on to it for now. He'll start clearing out those minions while the Leviathans whittle away the Fire Giant's lonely health bar, and that objective stands no chance against the might of Zapman. Draugr now goes down, same time, so they'll have it for this defense.
Yeah, so he waits just to make sure that once the Fire Giant siege starts up, they will have that additional defense for their structures. Left side, Phoenix will be respawning very shortly. Barracuda at least able to keep those waves pushed up while he was waiting to drop down that Draugr, but the Leviathans still are playing with house money at this point. Nice play from Lasbra to strip away some of that CC immunity from Panatom, but you just gotta think, even with that Draugr, a Soul and an AMC are gonna shred a Phoenix.
Zapman's going in by himself. He doesn't have those backdoor protections removed just yet because the minion wave hasn't made its way in. Rongyu and Panatom again grouping up by themselves in an opposite lane and forcing a now 2v2 fight over at this mid, while it's a 3v3 on the right-hand side, and Haddix is losing that battle. He's already lost half of his health.
And Zapman may have lost out on half of his, but he's got the resustain to just go ahead and heal up and fight yet again. Lazara forced back to base. Rongyu now has the flank, and the right side Phoenix is dropping low.
Addix goes in with the ultimate, but it's a supernova out of Zap in response to the CC immune himself. Shinto pops the beads, and Circle Protection is down. The orbs out of this Hunter are not doing enough damage. Jake is picked up and thrown to the wolves of the Leviathan. They grab the support instantly.
Meanwhile in mid, Lazara losing a 1v1 up against Panatom as well as his Phoenix. On the right-hand side, that Phoenix has been left exposed as well. Take a peek at the left, maybe that could be your silver lining. Nope, Minions got that one. Every single Phoenix stripped away, and Jake dead for 40.
Darkcore the only one low on this Leviathan squad as they look towards this Titan, the last objective standing in their way from closing out game number 2. It's now 4 versus 5 out of the Bolt. Jake back up in 23 seconds. But the Leviathans are playing so patiently. Darkcore waiting to resustain himself with these minions.
Does not have the minion wave to walk in with him, but does not need it. That Titan is
Nanu?
burning quick, but then faster.
But Nanu is gone. A drop kick against the wall is all that it takes to kill out the mid laners. Zapman loses the 2v1 that he got caught inside of. Lazara gets the credit for that one, but the Titan is going to go down, and the Leviathans are going to close out game number 2 nice and cleanly.
Says
Man,
no,
that-
Jake dies.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to try and play around that E-set ultimate because while it's notorious for being a huge objective controller, you don't get to control the objectives when it's constantly being burned off cooldown due to that frontline pressure that the Leviathans were just barreling into Jake with. They did not let him move in the slightest, and every single circle of protections that we saw come out was followed almost always by Jake's death, and that just left the Bolts with such a steep disadvantage that entering any sort of team fight in a 4v5 situation is never fun, but it's even less fun when, say, you do have that E-set in the 5v5, but they would burn out his relics, they would burn out his ultimate. So then you just have this mage hanging out that doesn't deal damage, has a difficult time applying her crowd control, I think, against the likes of what the Leviathans had drafted for, and, well, Benitum, Yarkon, Vrongyu, they all just kind of had a field day.
Yeah, they did more or less exactly whatever they wanted throughout this game. There's been getting stun locked there towards the very end. I'm frightened of the game to try and do so. And this is where things get, again, frightening for me. I look at Shinto. He's 5-0-4 here on this AMC. Now, we know Zapman as an accomplished carry. We know that Hardcore has done it this year. I feel like they just could swap whatever, whenever they want. Like next year, if there's some silly game, they could just shuffle all across the board. And I don't think they'd really look that much worse off. It feels like, Hazer, everybody can play anything.
Yeah, they might be the best team if we do some kind of, shuffled out roster thing. Nobody can play their own role. We swap them out and we see who really is the best Smite team. I think my money might be on the Leviathans right now. They seem to have Hardcore, Shinto, Zapman.
And they already have picks and bans for game number 3. The Bolts are going to be first pick this time. Now, the bans the last few times have been Odin, Camazot's Achilles for the Leviathans. It's been Yamoja, Hell, and Ardio there for the Bolts. And they are at least going to keep one of those things true right now, Hazer. They get rid of the Hell, but first pick at least opens up a different conversation for them.
Yeah, for sure. They can now take away one of the picks that the Leviathans is valuing highly. Even if they want to keep the same bans, they could, for example, first pick this AMC, take that away from Shinto. An interesting thing is I feel like teams who come into this event not playing Hell and feel like they need to permaban it are really handicapping themselves. I feel like teams really should have worked on that and picked that one up. If you're so scared of Shinto's Hell, you should have one yourself and you shouldn't be having to ban it on both sides.
Yeah, being able to control that, or at least first pick it here, would be such a boon towards them. Odin does get banned out so far. A lot that has been similar, but the Amus and Cobb Taco gets taken away this time by the Leviathans, not wanting the Bolts to pick that up, especially considering what we've seen Vin do it, I think, just recently at placements.
One big concern here, though, is that, as Hazer already pointed out, not having the possibility of taking the Hell for yourself does put a little bit more pressure, I would say, into this first pick priority out of the Bolts, because Leviathans, they have the choice now, Bastet, Olorun, Soul even, are arguably so, but also looking at that Achilles, I think that those are all 4 picks that we've been seeing Bolts and Leviathans definitely place some preference towards in their initial picks and bans, but Bolts, they can only get 1, if any, and it's going to be the Camazot, so Leviathans are essentially in a world of whatever you take, just know you're giving us back 2 more, and I just am not sold that the Leviathans are really all that pressed about losing out on the Achilles.
Now, yeah, with the Achilles getting locked in here, you have to wonder what the Leviathans are thinking. Like you said, maybe not too pressed about it at all, but This is a world, and Hazer and Taco, I actually want to think about or ask both of you this, because Artio has been banned against the Bolts. Nobody else is playing it. Yet it still feels like something the Leviathans could lock in here, Hazer. Is that is it something that you can even prioritize, or do you not even look at it?
Well, REO, is it not banned by the Bolts this time? Take it away one more time from Hardcore.
Oh, yeah, it's right there. Never mind. I'm blind. Don't mind me.
But it is just Hardcore's
the
signature
Smite Pro
pick,
meme.
right? Yeah.
It's the Smite Pro meme. No, it's, you know what? It's because I've got this beautiful alien where I have it written on the laptop. I have no excuse. It was literally right in front of me. I don't know why I decided to glance over it. But let's ignore that question then, and instead talk about what matches up well into the Achilles.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. We could see the Nike. One thing that people do like the Achilles in that matchup for is he can execute through that Nike shield. Shields, the health that's on a shield does not count towards your total health at the time. So executes there a 30% threshold. If you got 29% HP and a 30% shield, you're still executable. And you can interrupt that rend as well on the Achilles, but the Osiris, something that we saw Solo Troll do a lot of work on coming out here for the Leviathans, could be a flex as well. We have seen that go jungle in the past. Shout out Captain Twig.
You know, I was going to say, but there's a Bastet, and then I remembered that even today we saw Bastet solo, so I can't even actually use that as a foundational argument. But it is something that is a little, I don't even know if I want to use outlandish. I think we saw Panatom like earlier this year play the Bastet a few times, Taco, but ultimately with the Osiris here, I mean, this feels like some top-tier picks that are going the way of the Leviathans, and definitely comfort picks at that.
Yeah, if Benitham was playing Bastet, it would likely have been against a set where Scream was involved. That's probably the only player that I would imagine would ever really entice a team to want to take that Bastet before the rework. Now with Bastet's reworks having gone down, definitely a very potent pick here. Almost in any role, honestly, but the Osiris kind of alludes to the fact of fighting fire with fire. I mean, Osiris has a lot of laning pressure. It's the same way of matching up against the Achilles, and it seems as though the Bolts, they're looking for pressure of their own because it's something that they have definitely been lacking in these first couple of games.
Now, this has been an interesting conversation to have, but Gilgamesh, you know, well, actually, you look at all three of these. We've seen Gilgamesh, Achilles, and Serket in 3 different roles each throughout the year. That being said, Gilgamesh has almost always found a much more comfortable home in the jungle. Achilles can kind of swap, but with the Serket locked in here, it feels like this is finally the shy away from the E-set for Jake, right? He's going on something that he can be a little more proactive on.
Yeah, Serket as well, something I think he's had a pretty good year on. I think it's probably been his second best pick outside of that Yamoja, which he's not going to be getting in this set. It looks like a nor will wrong you. Both supports here definitely be really strong on that. But Serket, a pick that allows Jake to be mischievous, let's say. He can get in there, he can kind of be out of position, and he's so slippery that he can survive. And being such a really strong mechanical player, I think supports typically haven't been as mechanically strong as Jake is. He can really take advantage of that Cobra's Kiss and hit 2 targets with it, taunting them together, and then getting a massive Deathbane off.
That's been where a lot of the wins are. Might be matching up against a Fenrir, of all things, going up against a Taco. I mean, the Assassin, like, you roll back to, what was it, Season 6? That was a huge deal, but it feels like they had fallen off until recently. Now, all of a sudden, picked back up.
Can't really say I'm too surprised. I mean, Leviathan's raining cats and dogs with the Bastet Fenrir pickups, but I almost want to see Bolts run a more again. I actually think that there's a lot of ideal transformations. We know that it's a pick that Venenu definitely has looked incredibly strong on, and when your back's against the wall, the way that I think the Bolts are kind of pressed or corralled into this corner essentially by the Leviathans, they don't really have the luxury of trying to hold out on any sort of strats. I mean, they're right now looking at the potential of not even making it to semis or having that World's contention if they can't pull away a game win here.
This is not necessarily a comfortable spot, I think, for the Bolts whenever Tiamat's locked in. We'll cover that in a second. The bans, though, to catch up on them. Chiron, Soul taken away by the Leviathans, limiting down a little bit more of Vin and Bara. On the other side, it was the Heimdall and the Uller. And again, Heimdall feels like it is, you know, a shoe-in for Zapman, but the Uller definitely has been a Shinto special as of late. But now you've got, you know, the Tiamat added into the rest of these. What feels like it's going to be Zapman's pick is what they're waiting on here. But this Tiamat has treated Shinto pretty well throughout the year, Hazer.
Yeah, definitely been one of the premier Tiamats in the league. He's played really strong on it. There's a few guys that have played it really well. Baronic, definitely showing he's up there with Paul, Big Man Tings, and of course Shinto in there as well. Taco, I think, mentioned that the Bolts were looking for pressure this game. Discordia, perfect pick for that. If they want to play around the side lanes, you can get that passive onto one side and just chain invade and chain invade and chain invade. And the Disco will be quite happy to just AFK farm away in mid. I quite like this pick here.
And the Izanami alongside that Discordia. Taco, this has been like the pick to go to if you want to just be able to find pressure in the duo lane early on.
It's outright pressure here for the Bolts across the entire map spread, but as strong as I think Disco can enhance those side lanes, I also think that as far as that early game is concerned, she's a little bit vulnerable, especially against the likes of a Bastet, Fenrir, Osiris. That is such a heavy dive composition.
That we get in this third game, where it was the Hunter mid, the Magical Hunter over in the duo lane, all these assassins. Well, I mean, we're still getting a lot of the assassins here. But we kind of go back to a more traditional style, putting the more traditional mages over in that mid lane.
Yeah, now we're just playing Smite. Just tried and true. As old as Smite is, you've got this style of draft, but you gotta think that this Leviathans draft, man, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm with the desk, man. I really do like what the Leviathans have got for themselves. They've built a team that is going to burn beads pretty consistently. Yarkor can do it with the tether. Zapman can do it with the ultimate. That one's a little bit more iffy. Ragnarok always going to find that single target. Panatom always going to find that single target. Even Shinto, to a certain extent on this Tiamat, should be able to burn away some of those defensive relics. So I'm expecting Panatom to have a better showing on this Bastet than what we've seen from Lasbra in games of past. But with that being said, you gotta call out the Olympus Bolts where they are. I think this is a draft that fits their style much better. I think that Lazarus gonna have an easier time performing on this pick. He's gonna act more so as an initiator for his team rather than that kind of like side lane, tried and true assassin. You've got Ven to just boost up, likely Haddix on this Achilles. He's probably gonna have that passive for the majority of this game. And then Barracuda's playing a pick that just establishes pressure by existing.
A little bit of a skirmish in the mid lane right away, but it's just to get those minion controls and to try and establish some pressure for these left side Harpies. And there will be the Bolts who can grab the mid Harpies on the left. Leviathans will go ahead and default to the ones on the right-hand side. You know, something that the desk actually brought up that really kind of holds a true point. You know, they essentially do have two Ragnarok ultimates on the sides of the Leviathans. They have the actual true Ragnarok out of the wrong U, and then they have a ranged Ragnarok, which might be the scariest thing I've ever said.
That is pretty spooky, but maybe spookier for Shinto, who's dropped down so low off of this engagement from Lasbra. But in doing so, doesn't really get too much besides a bit of Shinto's HP bar. Defensive relics held on to here. But Shinto's going to have to play it a little bit safely in this lane on this Tiamat. Once he takes over to 5, once he gets some of that damage mitigation from the scales, then Shinto can start playing aggressively yet again. But Ven's been getting the better end of these trades. The Strife's have been finding their home. The Unruly Magic has been putting out so much poke. It's going to take a little bit for Shinto to get to a point where he's allowed to take these fights, especially with Panatom essentially completely shifting his style. He's no longer that initiator like the Erlong Shen or the Gilgamesh. Now on the Bastet, it's all about damage.
Very conservative play over here in the duo lane. Neither support really wanting to jump in to try and get any initiation going. Instead, they'll just farm up the lanes nice and casually with each other. Go ahead and get their own respective buffs. We're not seeing too many buff invades aside from where Haddix attempted to go for the blue. And Yarkor's the one caught in the middle, drop kicked against the wall. He doesn't have anywhere to go. When he needs the tether stun to come through, he'll get it somehow. Yarkor able to squeak by, and so will Panatom. He makes it out. But I can't say the same for the blue buff. That one should go to the Bolts.
Man, Haddix just clowns Yarkor in that engagement. Slams him with a stun, dodges out all the return poke with that combat dodge. That Achilles pick is putting in some work already, and now the Olympus Bolts, potentially for the first time this set, are able to establish some pressure in these side lanes. Blue buff invade goes their way, and Yarkor is just going to have to play without that additional mana for a good long time, especially considering it cost him his meditation as well.
The meditation being down is never going to be fun.
I really want to see the Bolts try and throw their weight around right now. Haddix still playing with a lead, and you've got a more aggressive early game jungler in the Gilgamesh. You got to play with your power points, and right now that's it.
Well, Lasbra is walking forward, but he's not going to go too far. Instead, it's Haddix at the forefront for his team to try and get this blue buff away. Panatom uses his leap to get away from the Bolts, but maybe a re-engage in, double stun out of wrong U does pick up Lasbra, and a dunk in by Yarkor to chase down the warrior, to chase out the jungler, but the dropkick holds him in, and the cat will hit the wrong target. Instead, it's the executed from Haddix just to get himself out. And even with all the fights, with 3, make that 4 ults if you're including Shinto's there expended, no blood spilled.
But blue buff invade does go the way of the Bolts. They are able to strip away that buff. It was not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. Both Haddix and Lasbra lose out on their beads there, so that double Ragnarok, as has been coined by the desk, just works.
Full CDR builds Well, at the moment, Shinto's going for double pen.
Yeah, very standard from Shinto here. Worth noting, we are playing on 8.12 right now. This is the patch where a lot of these standard mage items got some pretty nice power buffs. Obsidian Shard feels a lot better, Spear of Deso as well.
Rongyu not feeling too hot in the middle of 4.
Yikes.
The ultimate Ragnarok able to
Wow.
get himself enough distance. The execute off the mark by Haddix. And Rongyu was able to leap back in the tower to get away. All of that expended. The support still makes it out.
Man, Rongyu plays that so well. Early cancels the Ragnarok so they can jump over the wall, make sure that he doesn't take any additional damage from auto attacks, survives the poison more so towards the utility. Blackthorn Hammer in that second slot. The additional HP going to help out Lasbra a lot with DPS as well. Just a great item to pick up on Guild, but we've already got double pen for Panatom.
Well, we saw this earlier on. Rongyu uses the ultimate yet
Not
again,
again.
leaps over the wall, but Lasbra says not this time and throws the Wind to Shamash over the wall to catch him. But now it's Leviathans turning everything right back to the bolts. The execute, the fatal strike isn't going to get enough distance. Yarkor dunks on his head to get one. Lasbra stuck under the tower trying to juke away from Panatom, but now Panatom is going to go down because he steps a little too far, but at least Yarkor is able to make up and get a double of his own.
Why didn't Panatom just jump back? My man just walked through the tower. He just tanked it the entire time. Gotta think that Panatom could have just left that scenario, leaps in, doesn't even get the kill for himself, maybe tanking up for the rest of his team, but the Leviathans still do come out ahead on this engagement. First blood goes to the Bolts, but the majority of the blood goes to the Leviathans.
Shinto's farm, or I should say, the Olympus Bolts farm is now Shinto's farm. He solo invades the red buff. A little bit of help from Zapman walking over to establish some pressure.
Had they just allowed Rongyu to walk away, they would have kept their ultimates and the outcome would have been the exact same.
Pyromancer one more time by the Olympus Bolts, but there is a nice deep sentry ward staring right there, at least for Jake to get some vision if anybody goes through. Rongyu does pick up Awesome Jake, but it seems like the Bolts will be fine, potentially giving up their support, but they don't even have to do that just yet. Panatom goes in to try and find the leap, but it's a quick leap out. Execute is here for Haddix if he needs to use it, and he will not indeed get it off there. It gets body blocked out. Panatom makes it out just barely. Rongyu turns the fight around. Lasbra's gone, but the Winds are able to at least trade it out.
Barracuda left alone. Zapman, credit for this kill. Can Ven make his way out? We've seen some miraculous escapes. Not the case. Yarkor picks up yet another one. And, well, Haddix, can you get out? I'm not sure.
Zapman is here. Jake comes back after the brutal beating that he received earlier on. But they instead will not go for the dive. They'll just take the Tier 1 tower. Leviathans lose the Pyromancer, but they kill 3. They kill the Tier 1 tower. And they might even just be able to get this Tier 2 tower. Look at that tiny little bump on the graph that goes there for the Bolts back their way, and Leviathans immediately spike it right back down. 5,500 gold, 10,500 experience.
Praises of the Bolts right now.
Rongyu, because he's been in that level 12 threshold for a while now, he went back and got a fully upgraded Sunder and a Fire Giant just past the 18-minute mark here for the Atlantis Leviathans. And Haddix isn't even willing to walk forward to this. The Leviathans are just going to get a Fire Giant, and the Bolts are just going to try to kill Rongyu again, and they're just going to be unsuccessful one more time.
I don't know how many times the Bolts are going to try it and it just not work. I mean, Rongyu is just going to keep doing exactly what he has been. This is more valuable of a Ragnarok than him picking up anybody on the Olympus Bolts and having them killed. He is burning that many resources. The Bolts are just butting their head into this wall.
I mean, it's 3 ultimates again by the Bolts. The same 3 ultimates they tried last time, that they've tried the time before and the time before that.
Either Yarkor or Panatom to act as that solo agent. Not sure anybody from the Bolts likes their odds in a 1v1 up against either one of those guys. But the longer the Leviathans wait, the higher the chances are of a Bolt's resurgence here. Only 50 seconds to play with on this Fire Giant.
Well, it's a 3-2 split, and they put the solo jungle over on that middle Phoenix to try and hold in. Rongyu leaps in place thinking maybe he can bait something out of the Bolts, but now just waiting for the minions to get back to try and do some damage to this Phoenix. Meanwhile, the other 2 members of the Bolts, now joined by Shinto, going to try and get some pressure established towards this mid-side bird. And they're doing a decent bit of damage to it, and the golden apple onto Rongyu, and he'll take that apple every day of the week.
Rongyu tries to walk up and just force resources by threat of Ragnarok, stands near every individual member of the Olympus Bolts on the left-hand side of the map, and the Bolts call his bluff. No pre-beads from them. It's only Ven who expends the ultimate. So that might be the lowest value Ragnarok we've seen from Wrong Yu this
That's
game.
with level 20
And
on the side of the Bolts. But with the Fire Giant coming back in, the Leviathans won't have any contest towards it. Zapman and Panatom and Shinto can take as long as they need to shred this objective down. They won't take much time. The Leviathans get yet again another uncontested Fire Giant, and the Bolts are once again on the back foot as they've got to defend against now all 3 of their Phoenixes.
All relics available to the Bolts except for Blink on Haddix, and all ultimates up as well. So this is as strong as the Bolts are going to be on this defense. The Leviathans have decided to forego the split push, and instead they're going in as 5.
Barracuda has already taken some poke, and so is Haddix. Lasbra opening up the door to maybe try and make a path in the back, but it's Wrong Yu going to the carries. Jarkor dives in the back line, and Wrong Yu is finally getting a lot of damage thrown his way. This might be the first time they can finally get a big pick onto the support. They get him down, and now Panatom is low. Lasbra able to pick that one up and make it a 2-for-1 trade, and maybe a third if Haddix can find Shinto in the back line, but Shinto able to peel himself out, and a drop kick will be the last thing that Lasbra gets to do. It's the last thing that the Bolts may get to do here, because it's now 3 versus just Jake, but Jake might have enough CC and damage to hold them.
Zapman dropped low here, but it won't stop him for long. The Leviathans have got their eyes on the Titans.
Triple kill for Shinto to end game 3 and send the Olympus Bolts packing. The Atlantis Leviathans get a clean sweep here in our second set of the day, and they move on to the semifinals.
What a...
I guess the Leviathans are going to win this next fight again. It felt like so much of a heavy investment early on for the Bolts that just never had any returns.
Yeah, it just felt like it didn't feel like they had any advantage on the map anywhere. Even when they made the effort to rotate Barracuda over from the duo lane to the solo side of the map to go for objectives, even then in 5v4s they didn't look like they were in control of the game. They just never looked in control. They never looked confident. And I think, honestly, they almost lost this game after game one rather. It felt like after that long back and forth of fire, they finally win it. They lose out the game, getting wiped. We never saw the Bolts again in this set.
Mentally, I'd be out of it too if I lost to a Nox, just in general. So that is something, and that bears repeating. We'll talk about that more in the post-game show. But there was a Nox this set, and that is always worth remembering. But this game, again, Taco, it just felt pretty clean, and a lot of it, like, there's not necessarily one individual player, although I will say that triple kill at the very end from Shinto, where he stood up, he stopped playing the game while they were winning. It just felt like everybody kind of had their moment.
That was almost a perfect fight even for the Olympus Bolts, and then the Zapman effect kind of took over. I think that Zap's positioning around that final Phoenix siege that led into the game 3 win, that was a huge setup play there from Zapman, really taking full advantage of that Death's Embrace plus the Aussie passive, proccing at just the right time for him, able to position, and he just went in. That's the difference, I think, is just there was just so much confidence in everything that the Leviathans did throughout this set, and I think it definitely just took a massive hit there to the Bolts, because that is a tough one to lose when you have the enhanced Fire Giant. And then
here for the Leviathans, and they move forward now to face off against the Camelot Kings. So there are your matchups for tomorrow that you can tune in. The Titans and the Scarabs will be the first one. Of course, now the Leviathans and the Kings. Something that, Hazer, if I'm the Kings, I'll admit I'm a little worried. That was a very good set for the Leviathans.
Yeah, definitely strong. This didn't look like the same Leviathans that the Kings managed to dispatch at the Phase 3 playoffs. They looked very, very strong. They should take a lot of confidence from this win as well, I think, which is something that I believe the Leviathans need. They need confidence. They need to know that they can do it on the big stage and they can get through these big matches and maybe go all the way.
And it's one of the things I know we had joked about at the end of the Phase 3 playoffs, but the Kings had played 15 games.
I mean, a few times, you know, the Bolts, it looked like they were going to win game 1 on that Phoenix siege, and then the Leviathans really turned that around. And that was, that Phoenix going down in game 1 was the last time I felt like the Bolts had an ounce of momentum in this set.
Yeah, it just really felt like the Bolts lost all the wind in their sails. They had the wind knocked out of them after game 1. I mean, we didn't get to see much from them. It felt like they were really starting to lean into that reactive style of play that we've seen from them in the past when the Bolts do start to fall behind. They kind of fail to go for these proactive plays on the map. They fail to try and set the pace despite picking some compositions that would have really benefited from early aggression. It was a lot of wait and see from the Olympus Bolts, and if you're going to wait and see, all you're going to see is, well, the Leviathan's hitting you in the face. Maybe you catch a glimpse of a fist flying at you.
Now, there were 15 minutes separating the last two highlights in Game 1 there, which is funny just
makes
because
sense.
to me it was, there were a lot of fights that happened in that 15 minutes. Not a lot of kills, though. Everybody would get low, they'd back off, they'd reset, they'd come back, they'd fight, they'd get low, they'd back off, they'd reset, rinse and repeat, ad nauseum, until the Bolts finally were able to get themselves the Fire Giant. And then a brilliant push from the Leviathans, not only get a bunch of kills, wins them the game for the first one. Game 2, Mifflin, it was a lot more convincing. It was not just, okay, yeah, you guys won, but you were able to repel a base defense. This one was in control for the Leviathans every step of the way.
Yeah, just Panatom setting the pace early on this Gilgamesh, creating so much space for both Zapman and Shinto. If you remember back, I think that was the game where he essentially just went a full defense build, early Witchblade, into the Shoguns as well. And it was so hard for the Olympus Bolts to get the ball rolling anywhere on the map. This is the second time that Lazar decided to go back towards the Bastet as well, and I don't know, man. I don't think that's in his god pool.
No.
I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, it wasn't Lazarus' best look for sure. I mean, you're watching Shinto put on like a legitimate clinic with AMC. I mean, how many times, like, every auto is him leaning over the wall with his left shoulder and just connecting with the stinger or the auto attack or whatever it is. And look at how much space is being created by the front line right there. Panatom, Yarkor, and Rongyu, that front line for the Leviathans that's been so good all year that it felt like that front line was so dominant for them. I think that they really showcased how good they can be in this set.
And we got to see, a very, very, again, controlling game number 2. Game 3 had a little more back and forth from the Bolts aggro. But, and I will admit, my favorite part of this game, despite how fun it was from top to bottom, actually had to be at the very end. Shinto gets the triple kill on the Tiamat, and then stood up, like Zap in the rest of they're still trying to kill the Titan, and Shinto's like standing, yelling at the monitor at the time. Like, he was just in the moment. And it just felt like that's the kind of energy these guys exude, right? It's just the happiness, you could feel the elation from them, and now getting to move forward. This was a huge win for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, all the talk about this team has been, well, yeah, obviously they're great, but can they win in these pressure situations? Are they going to be able to perform their best? And today the answer was yes. And, the problem is that they've got even more high-pressure games coming up, but, I was talking about it a lot before this LAN and that kind of stuff. I don't think that it's just going to be...
He just stopped
Well, he's
moving.
standing, you see.
My man's done.
Watch him now.
Yeah, he's been done. I think if the Leviathans play like this, they've got a really good chance to be lifting this hammer right in front of me.
Of course, the things we've seen, the things that remain to be seen, specifically this Saturday and Sunday. I am looking in on Saturday. I'm excited, of course, for all of these semifinals, but the Content Creator Cup has been interesting, being able to see the new Slash map. And Mifflin, I think you're pretty excited there for the Season 9 Conquest map show match, because it's an old guard, and I think you might be an old guard here.
Well, I mean,
Like a little bit.
I'm not like super old, I used to guard. I no
You are
longer
like
guard.
23.
All right, that's all that's happened here.
Yeah, here's the thing about Mifflin and being an old guard, okay?
He did play in the SPL.
What are you
did play in the
What are you gonna
SPL.
say? Go ahead.
He's not old enough to wear long sleeve shirts underneath his suit jacket.
I
okay?
am. I simply chose not to. I don't have any floral long sleeves.
As he has chosen not to every single time we've worn suits.
That's right.
But he did play long enough ago to qualify for this, I suppose.
At what level? The highest level,
The
right?
SPL level,
Yeah,
that's
that's
correct.
right.
Well,
Did
you were at the
Did you ever get there?
No, but you were at the bottom of the
Oh, yeah.
SPL.
You were playing in the console league. Where were you at on that?
Season 2, I wasn't playing at all.
Oh, that's right. What about Season 3?
Season 3,
Early retirement.
He's casting the finals.
early
retirement. You're welcome.
He's cast the finals for what, 5 years, and now this could make 6
Yep.
going for
It's
you.
his
Either
last
way,
one.
we can look at it. Yeah, Mifflin is gunning for that spot. We'll see. You know what? We'll keep our eyes open. Season 9, maybe it's your year, Mifflin.
That's right.
Yeah,
No, you're just right.
that's okay. That's the energy you're coming back at me with. I was hoping it was going to be like, you know what, maybe. But yeah, no, you're
No,
confident.
you were correct. And I congratulate you in being so.
Well, here's the bracket for the weekend. Of course, the schedule, what you can expect to see. Win to be here tomorrow, 1 p.m. Titans and Scarabs. And then a little bit later, whenever that set finishes, is when the Kings will take on the Leviathans. Again, all best of 5s, all incredibly fun, especially after what we saw the Leviathans and the Scarabs today. The Titans earned their spot, and they chose